It's easy to be nice and kind when life is going your way. It is very, very easy. But the true mark of a person is like, how do you act, how to react, how do you perform when life is kicking you with both feet?
Welcome to the Eat, Play, Crush podcast. I am your host, Mary Shanuda.
Adam.
Mary.
Welcome to the Eat, Play, Crush podcast.
Oh, so happy to be here. We finally made it happen.
We did make it happen. I appreciate you fitting it in. I'm going to flex. You could be having pancakes right now with Arnold, and you told him you couldn't.
I did. I was very tempted. The pancakes looked so good. I bumped into Arnold unexpectedly. He was like, sit down, have breakfast with us. And I'm like, I can't because I had to be right here, right now. And I was not going to miss this.
I'm excited to talk to you for many different reasons, but I want to emphasize you're someone I really trust. And you are on that short list of people that I'm a little nervous to interview. So I have to remind myself it's just a conversation with a friend because you're an OG, you're a legend, you're behind the scenes for juggernauts, Arnold being one of them, Tim being another. But your body of work goes way back. Was it editor of Men's and Health?
Yeah, so I was the fitness nutrition editor for Men's Health for many years. Yeah.
And Live Strong, you were behind that.
I was editorial director for Live Strong when they were the largest wellness site on the internet. We had at one point 42 million people a month coming to the site.
You're pretty young. When did you get into all of that?
I'd like to say that I started in the industry like when I was a teenager, but I got into journalism right around the time I was 20, but thought it was just a hobby. I just, it was like, you can't be a journalist. You can't make money. And then over time, changed careers multiple times, but kept on finding my way back to what I like to just say is communication and connection. And then I became the fitness editor at Men's Health in my late 20s.
How do you become that?
By accident, So, I started out in psychology, right? I thought I was going to be an academic in psychology. So my focus was both on like the exercise phys side and then on social psychology. And I went down the social psychology path. And at a very, very young age, I was a researcher in teaching at the university level, the University of Colorado. And there was this aha moment I had, like very, very long story short, where we had this huge study that ended up blowing up, getting a bunch of grant money, was covered like on all the morning shows. And we see like the finding of the study and like truly it's like like a scene from the movie where like you realize what's going on and all the lead researchers are like high-fiving and exciting. And I didn't have any of that. Right. And I'm like, here I am in my early 20s. And I'm like, shouldn't I be this excited? And if I'm not,
right,
what's it going to be like 5 years from now, 10 years from now, where I'm already not excited? And I had this like, wait, this isn't for me. Like, what gives me this type of excitement? And it was writing. And I applied to all of these jobs knowing that I had all this freelance work, and I got rejected from every single one. Every single one. And then I was like, the next best thing, I was like, well, if I can't get these jobs, maybe I need more education. I don't have a degree in journalism, right? Mine is on the exercise phys side and the psychology side. Maybe I need a journalism degree. So I go and apply to all these journalism schools with no background in journalism and get into a few of them and go back to school. And when I graduated, I had found someone at the school I went to who had done what I kind of wanted to do, a guy by the name of Ted Spiker. And Spiker was a senior editor at Men's Health. He's written all of these best-selling books, and he was a teacher. And I'm like, that guy has got it figured out. I remember day one, when I went to grad school, I sat down at his office, and I'm like, I want to do what you do. I want to learn from you.
Is that what you said?
Oh, yeah. I sat down. He had no idea who I was. And I'm like, you're doing everything I want to do.
Please tell me you had a backpack, like a baseball cap,
100%.
Going back to school.
And because I was a total fitness pro at the time, I had a gallon jug as well. Gallon jug of water, backpack on my back. I was in like my mid-20s then because I had a few years in, working. And then I went back to school and I'm like, I want to beat you. Yeah, I want to be on you, Ron Burgundy voice, right? I was like, I want to beat you. And he's like, nah, you can't beat me. And I'm like, I want to know what you did. And I really tried to, create this path to getting there. When I graduated from grad school, I went and I was honest with myself, like, I don't mind working for things. So I applied for an internship at Men's Health. Keeping in mind that, when I was 22, 23 years old, I was making pretty decent money at academic level. And then I trained people on the side, and it was a pretty cushy, good living. And I'm like, I'm going to go be an intern, as if like I'm some teenager, but I didn't care. And I'm like, I will work my way up. I fly out to Emmaus, Pennsylvania, where Men's Health is, for an internship position. And on the way back, I had a layover in Chicago on my way back to Florida. And I had a voicemail from the editor over there, Adam Campbell, saying, we're not going to offer you the internship. I'm sorry. Instead, we'd like to offer you a job as editor.
Did they deliver it that way, where it was the neg and you're like,
yes.
Oh, and then you're like, ah!
It was a voicemail. Oh, that's right. I went in there and I had 5 different interviews. I thought it was such an extensive thing. And little did I know that Spiker had really vouched for me, that like this guy can work.
How did you feel when you left the interview? Did you feel like you nailed it?
Or I felt great.
Okay.
I felt great. I mean, the only thing that there was one interview where like they grill you on an entire issue of the magazine, and before you even go in, you have to critique the entire magazine.
Ooh, I feel like that's right up your alley, though.
Yeah, critique the entire thing, and I remember sitting down.
Critique, giving it especially.
I love giving feedback because I'm not afraid to just tell you how I feel.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
If there's one thing about me, love me or hate me, you know that I will come transparent with you
100%.
every time.
Yeah.
I'm not here to make you feel good. I'm just here to give you, and I went very, very straight. I remember sitting down with Peter Moore, who's a fantastically talented editor, and he gets to this one critique. It was about a female chef. And I didn't like it because I didn't find it engaging. And I'm like, you missed out all the layers of this character of what made her most interesting. And I remember being like, yeah, I edited that piece. And I was like,
yes. That's what sealed the deal, though.
Yeah, and I'm like, it was good.
Yeah.
I mean, I loved it.
It was complete.
You wrote it. It's in your, you can't cheat. You submitted this tome critique. And I'm like, yeah, I was drunk. I don't drink. Wait, is that okay? Resveratrol, was that still popular then? Is that okay? Oh, yeah. And so I thought it was great.
Yeah. And so
other than that,
you're in the layover, you get that.
Have this voicemail, and it truly was like, you didn't get the internship. And I'm like, damn it. Because I remember there was a lot of grad students too who were like, wait a second, like you're applying for a job at Men's Health, an internship at Men's Health. And they kind of scoffed a little bit. Because I was also a bit of an outsider in grad school because all of them were like journalism undergrad, following the progression. I came in.
You're still an outsider. We'll get to that.
Totally an outsider. And it was just like, you know, and I got there on an academic scholarship. I was a teaching assistant because I couldn't afford it because I had some like tragic knee accident when I didn't have insurance that like caused me to push back schooling, right? Everyone's got their own like crazy struggle that leads to their story. And mine was me having a 2-week window where I didn't have health insurance because I was changing jobs, and I went skiing and I blew out my left knee. ACL, MCL, lateral meniscus, medial meniscus, fractured kneecap, broken femur, all in one accident. No health insurance. That's an expensive mistake.
And that's separate from your back break.
That is separate from me breaking my back twice. Yes. No struggle, no story, right? So I push that back. I get there. I go through all of this, and I'm there. Like everything's been building up to this moment of like, oh, I wanted to get this job. And I went to the school and sat down with Ted Spiker and began like a 2-year journey to get to this moment. And just for an internship. And I didn't get the internship. And he's like, instead, we're hiring you to be our fitness editor. And I was like, oh my goodness, are you kidding me? And I was just like, I'm like running through O'Hare and I'm all fired up. I remember calling my dad and I'm like, dude, I got a job. And that is your very non-traditional way of like, how do you become fitness editor at Men's Health? You take the path of most resistance and you find your way there.
And you went in there with humility. You're like, don't pay me, just get me in here. And then the universe was like, bet.
Yeah. They're like, all right, we're going to give you the job.
Gratitude, blessings.
Yeah. And I'm like, let's go. And that began, you know, a 4+ year journey at Men's Health. That was great. I learned so much.
And you probably made so many connections and relationships
everything. And it was frustrating because there was a lot of things that I wanted to do. I was like insatiably hungry. I wanted to write books, and I helped develop this app and help build the video game. And we did spin out for a little while. There was no one at Women's Health, so I would double and help out editing the women's health stuff. And we tried to make a children's health magazine. Children don't buy magazines. Wasn't a good idea. But I just I got involved with everything, but I wasn't moving up. I wasn't making more money, and I was getting really frustrated. Because I'm I'm giving everything. I'm first one in, last one out. It's just it's in my mind what I thought would lead to it. And there were plenty of times where it's just they're not going to see it. And luckily I had enough people around me who were no, keep on doing what you're doing. This is, I remember having a conversation with someone who was this is a blue chip stock. If you can hold it, right? Keep on developing your skill. If you're not getting more opportunity, you're not good enough yet, which is a hard thing to hear. And it was an essential thing to hear, because when I didn't get my way, I didn't throw a fit and quit, or I didn't demand this or that. I just kept on working, kept on connecting, kept on learning. And I went from being, at an editor level to being editorial director at a massive website, getting to move from Emmaus, Pennsylvania to Santa Monica, California, going from living in the middle of the nowhere to living on the beach. And that's kind of always been what makes me tick, or it's be very, very patient. It's no different. We go back to you asked how I get to be the fitness editor at Men's Health. I remember when I wanted to get a job to make money on the side when I was teaching at the University of Florida in grad school. And I went to, apply for a job, and they told me no. And they told me no again. So then what I started doing is every single weekend, I would go to high school football games. So I wanted to write for the Gainesville Sun, and I would write up my own story. And then the following day I would drop it on Arnold Feliciano's desk, who at the time was the editor over there, and was basically hire me, hire me, hire me, until he was finally all right, I'll give you a chance. You can go and work the sports desk, working ungodly hours. And I'm I don't mind earning it. I actually like it. I like it that way. I like being the underdog.
This is what happens when you don't quiet quit or or whatever the term is.
Right. I don't even know, but I know what you're referring to. Yeah. You just mail it in. You're collecting a salary. Yeah.
That's how I've moved up from tech to where I am now. It's going 110%. So then I'm rewarded that 10% at some point, where people are I'm only going to do what I'm asked to do. When I don't like it, I'm going to bail because I deserve more. And it's no, I'm going to demonstrate the value first. I'm going to demonstrate what I'm willing to do, which seems to be losing its understanding. I don't know. I think I'm getting old now, because I'm oh, you kids don't know.
You can't be getting old because I'm older than you, but I know what you're saying. But I think it's just there's something to the frustration is real. The pain is real. Me and you share our pain quite frequently, right? Where we don't try and fix one another's pain. We just listen and give space because it's real, and you want to be able to validate that. And at the end of the day, and you're very similar to me in this, I want to show up a certain way in my life, because whether anyone else recognizes it, I do.
Right.
I recognize it. At the end of each day, I have to look myself in the mirror. I have to look my kids in the eye. I have to look my wife in the eye. I have to look my peers and friends in the eye. And I have to be able to say, what am I about?
Right.
And talk is very cheap. And you're oh, I'm this hardworking person, I do it. But then when in reality, because you're frustrated by circumstance, you don't show up that way.
Right.
I don't want my life to be that way.
Right.
I want to know, especially when it's hard, that I show up the way that would make me proud. And I truly do believe, while it might not always go my way or show up in the way that I expect, that over time, that means something. And in time, over the last 20 years, I have seen showing up like that. Someone's always watching.
Right.
Someone always noticed, whether you realize it or not. And that is all the reason to keep doing it. But the best reason to do it for yourself.
The only reason why, I don't know if you noticed, I got emotional, is it reminded me of something my friend said. And she's a friend that passed away this year and was just a big advocate for me. But I was once venting her. I was convince me why I should keep being a good person, because I'm not getting it. And she just starts laughing, and she goes into her pocket, takes out a compact, and she puts it in my face. And she's this is why you have to be a good person, because you have to look at yourself at the end of the day. And I know your moral compass, and I know your values, and you can't live with yourself if you are not going to live up to those standards you've set. And I'm damn it, Brandy.
Yeah. I've got no comeback. You're right.
So you're at Men's Health. And where I'm going with this conversation or this particular question is you are very thoughtful and methodical. So it seems when it comes to choosing projects you work on or where you go next. So was it from there to Live Strong? And when did you know it was time?
When it didn't see Men's Health evolving how they ran their business, right? And like magazines were dying. I remember I was there 2007, 2008, 2009. There was a bloodbath where like all these magazines started dying. I can't remember the exact number, but I want to say like 100 plus people were fired from Rodale, which was the publisher at the time that owned Men's Health. Now it's Hearst. And you see this like evolution happening where it's not that Men's Health is such a great brand with truly some of the most talented people I've ever worked with. But the ecosystem, the environment was changing. And you either change with it really, really quickly or you become a dinosaur. You become a blockbuster. And I've never been one that like just because everyone else doesn't see it and I do, I'm wrong sometimes, but also I'm right sometimes. And I'd rather strike out going with my own instinct than strike out because I just did what all the incumbents were doing.
Right.
Man, I was like, digital's the future, video's the future, everything with email marketing is a huge capability, apps, like there's so many different ways that people are becoming integrated and educated and connecting and community is big. And I also, I wanted that challenge. I wanted to go in a space where at some point, you know, I like helped out with books and I helped with apps and all this stuff, but I wasn't getting the things that challenged me to grow, right? That forced resistance that like make you better. And I just realized the combination of, I wasn't super confident like what I was getting to do within the business and how it was growing. And I really wasn't feeling like I was growing. And I was like, I need a bigger challenge. And I'm applying to jobs and I didn't get a lot of them. And the true story about Livestrong is I applied for Livestrong and I got a no. So then I went and looked up who was like in charge of this. There was one person was Jeremy Reed, one was Dan Bryan, and I found them on LinkedIn and I wrote them. And I'm like, I don't understand. I want to understand why I don't even get an interview. You don't need to hire me, right? I'm not here. I didn't get my way. But I'm someone who I'm really good at listening, but being good at listening means you got to ask good questions and ask hard questions. I'm like, if I'm not good enough for something, how do I get better if no one's telling me?
Right.
It's like that. It's the thing I see as a parent. My kids hate it when I criticize them or give them feedback. And I'm like, listen, I'm not here to hurt you. I'm not here to make your life hard, but I am here to teach you how to be better and to learn from your mistakes. And if I don't ever tell you, you don't ever learn. And I'm like, it's kind of the broken part of our ecosystem is like, oftentimes we just get the end result, a no, or not happening, but we don't find out why. And that's how we get better. So I reach out to them and I remember Jeremy Reed, very, very kind, gets back to me and he's just like, well, you don't have any experience dealing with a female audience and we're looking for a female audience. I'm like, what do you mean? Like I worked with women's health. I wrote this female-based book. I've done a ton of work. I was like, well, like we've kind of got boxes we check on the resume and like we just didn't see anything. And I'm like, but that's not true. And he's like, okay. He's like, let's get on a phone call. And he was kind enough to get on a phone call. We talked out. Next thing I knew, I was flying out to Santa Monica and I had a day full of interviews to go ahead and do it. And I ended up getting the job. And that wasn't because I was like, I didn't get the job, throw a fit. I was willing to go, can you please tell me where I need to improve? Because I just want to get better. And I'm okay if I'm not ready. I'm okay if I'm not qualified enough. I'm okay if you don't think I'm the right answer. I'm not okay if no one's going to tell me what's missing and then I've got to do that work. And it just so happened that it was like a clerical thing, right? It's why like how many opportunities do people never actually get? Not because they don't deserve it or aren't qualified enough, but because something like that, someone in HR is like looking to check off boxes and just throws your resume in the wrong pile where it doesn't belong. And are you willing to persist over that and not just take no?
But there's a style in the persistence, right? There's a charm, there's a humility in it, not an I expect you to tell me what I did wrong or how dare you not.
I want to give you a great story that probably embodies that, and it has nothing to do with career. So last year, I've got an 8-year-old and a 5-year-old. My older son comes to me and he goes, I don't want a birthday party this year. He's like, I want to go to Disney instead. And I'm like, not exactly the same price. Disney and a birthday party, false equivalency here. But I'm like, I like where your mindset's at. You want an experience. I'm all about people and experiences. Tell everyone that my life value is like people and experiences. Find great experiences, meet great people, have great experiences. At the end of my days, I value that so much. So I'm like, all right, I'll take you to Disney. Now, I had been to Disney before, but pre-COVID, you could walk up to Disney, no problem. I didn't know that this changed post-COVID. So I booked the tickets. We fly out there. We get there, got a hotel room, and then I go to buy tickets. And I go to like the hotel, which you just get them right there. And they're like, yeah, you can't get a ticket. They're like, you have to buy it way in advance in their reservations because they have a quota on how many people they let into the parks now. And I'm like, wait, what? And they're like, yeah, there's nothing available for the next 2 weeks. I'm like, there's no way to get in. Like, there's no way to get in. I walk back up to the hotel room. I tell my wife this, and my son is right there, and he just starts crying. Right? He's there. They wanted to go to the Avengers campus. He's in his Black Panther costume. My older son loves Black Panther. My younger son loves Thor. He's in his Thor costume, and they're just both crying in their costumes in a hotel. And I go into the bathroom, and I just sit down. And I just cry. I just cry because I've screwed up before, and I will screw up again. But as a father, I feel like there's never anything where like there was almost gross negligence on my behalf that caused this pain for my kids.
But you weren't in costume when you were crying.
I was not. That would have been even better. But I royally fucked up. And I felt so bad. And I sat there, and it's like, I got to go make this right. So like my wife's like, what are you going to do? And she's it's an accident. It's okay. I'm like, I'm going to go walk over to the park and I'm going to go talk to someone. So I go, and it was like a 20-minute walk, and I walk over to the park, and there's like all these towers that go into the gates to get in. There's still 3 people in the towers. And I'm looking there, and I'm like, who's my person? I'm like, if I have to, I'm going to go up to all 3. Right? Keep in mind, it was my mistake, my error. And I go up, and I go to the one that was like in the middle. There was another one on the right, and then someone like two down on the left. And I just explain my story. Like, I wanted to surprise my kid with this trip to Disney. I surprised him, bought it. I didn't know, though, that we had to do this. And he's like, what type of person flies their family out here without getting to... I'm like, this person. I'm like, this is my mistake. And I'm asking him, like, do you have any kids? She had 6 kids. Oldest was 18. And I'm like, imagine when back when they were young. How'd you know? I'm going in like sales mode, which is to me is not about selling people. It's about connecting with them.
Right.
And it's about like, listen, I made this mistake, but I want to make this right. And she's like, we have quotas. We can't do anything. So I'm just like, it's like, keep them on the line, right? You've been in like corporate before. It's like, just keep them on the line. Just like connect. I'm like, what can I do? And I'm like, can I buy a season pass? And will that allow me in? And they're like, you can buy the season pass, but that won't get you in. Because you still have to book your day in advance. When you got that season pass, you can go and book anytime, but you still got to book. And I'm going through
Can I call
everything.
Arnold Schwarzenegger to call you?
True story. I have never asked Arnold like for a favor. And I text his chief of staff, and I'm like, do you have any connections to Disney? And I'm like texting him while I'm there, like, and I'm like, I never do this, but like, here's the situation. We're here. Bodhi's crying in the hotel. And he's like, we got no connection. And I'm like, and it was so nice because like Arnold seemed like we can call on their behalf and say you're a good person. We like can't pull up. And I'm like, yeah, I'm not like calling in that favor. And it's just like, right, your mind does start going in those things where the things you would never do, like you don't want to let down your kids. So I'm there probably for like 20 minutes with this woman, and it's like late afternoon. So there's like no one in line behind us. And I'm like, is there anything I can do? And she goes, well, like at 11 o'clock at night, anyone who hasn't like reserved their ticket said they would, they like open up if there's like availability, and you can try and like scoop up. But she's like, everyone's online. So it's just like, if you see a ticket available, you got to buy and go for it. And like, otherwise what I can do is I can sell you a ticket right now and you have to pay for it. And if it doesn't open up at any point, you essentially have 14 days to use this ticket. And if not, you're out of money. Disneyland for a family 4 is not cheap. And I was gonna be the whole weekend, so it's like it's buying 4 tickets for 2 different days. And I look at her and I'm like, you know what? Thank you. thank you so much, because this might not work out. I'm only here for the weekend.
Mhm.
This might be, $1,000 plus penalty, but I'm like, this is the idiot tax. And I'm like, I really want to thank you because you're at least giving me a chance to fix it, and it's better than no chance. Thank you so much. I'll pay for this now. Happy to do it. I got about to pay, and then like this woman comes out from the side, and she's like, hold up. And she goes, I sit here all day long, like I'm this woman's supervisor, and I hear these people get yelled at left and right. And this woman just told you that you can't get in, you got to pay $1,000+, and you might not even be able to use it. And all you were doing is thanking her and being gracious and being kind to her and accepting responsibility. She's
Mm-hmm.
like, that is so rare. You're not yelling at her. You're not doing any of that. She's like, I'm getting you into the park this weekend. She's like,
Did you cry at that point? Because I'm crying listening to this
She's
story.
like, you pay, you tell your son he's getting in tomorrow.
And you taped his reaction. Huh? You didn't tape his reaction.
Didn't tape his reaction. I was just too happy. That whole walk home. It's a great lesson, because I teach my kids all the time, like, kindness wins, right? But it's so rare because it doesn't always win.
Right.
Kindness doesn't always win. But I could have come up there and like make this person feel small, and it was 100%. Just like when I don't get a job, they probably have a very good reason. Like, we don't see what they see, which might be an error, or it might be that like you're not good enough. But it's like there is a way that you can hold yourself where you maintain your integrity.
Right.
And it was my mistake. There is no, my wife says, like, on my tombstone should be like, I make big messes, but I clean them up. And that is a good way to describe me. I do make some big messes, but I do always clean them up.
That's so much more profound. I want mine to say, I told you this would happen.
Yeah. And that is kind of how I want to go about it. Like, no one's to blame for anything that happens to me, good or bad, right or wrong. Mm-hmm. But I am in control of how I react to things, how I act things, how people remember me, especially when I don't get my way. Mm-hmm. Right? It's easy to be nice and kind when life is going your way. Mm-hmm. It is very, very easy. But the true mark of a person is like, how do you act? How to react? How do you perform when life is kicking you with both feet?
You think that's earned or learned?
Probably both. I'd love to be able to put it in a box and say like, oh, it's just one. But like, you learn that because like, I'd love to say that I've never thrown a tantrum, but I'm upset when things didn't go my way, and that'd be a lie.
Right.
But you see how people then react to you, and more importantly, you see how you react to yourself. I think so much about life is like how you can feel about yourself in both the high moments and the low moments. And I know how I feel good when I do the type of things where I actually respect myself, my name, my family name, the way that I was raised, the people who vouch for me. Like, nothing happens in a vacuum. Something that I've learned in life, like, you have so many friends and acquaintances, family member, and like, you are a representation of yourself, but you're also a representation of them. And I've screwed up before, and I've screwed up badly. And sometimes it's not just that it represents you wrong, it represents other people. And I try to learn from all of those, using it even in adulthood when I haven't showed up the way that I want. Like, how can I be a better representation of me and for the people around me? And when I can keep that front of mind, it makes it very easy for me to act in a way that like I would be proud of, my kids would be proud of, my parents would be proud of, my wife would be proud of, my friends would be proud of. And like, that's the type of thing that, keeps me centered.
Yeah. If you weave that style into traditional idea of success, it makes success as a resume take longer, right? Because you're doing it the right way. So you are bringing your essence to things, and it's not going to be overnight.
You go slow to go fast.
That embodiment, that gentleness, you and I shared our fair share of hardships in life. And the gentleness is a byproduct of, unfortunately/fortunately, being in those moments where you have every excuse to lash out in the moment, or have a short temper, or not be patient, or not give somebody space because you've got this shit right here.
Right.
But instead, we've chosen just to actually be more gentle and have more compassion, which, going back to how we initially met and then how we actually became friends, I feel so bummed to have lost out on so much time knowing you because of the environment that we met in. Something you and I both share in common is we are in the wellness world and in the online marketing world, but not of that world.
Right.
You seem to hold space better than I do. I'm learning how to still be in those rooms without that reaction of just like my body being tense. But when I was only quote unquote paleo chef for a few months when I met you. And I was leaving this structured environment, corporate America, accountability, transparency. And I found myself being found by a lot of the figureheads in the spaces that we play in. And I was like, oh, this is cool. I'm going to be around a lot of people that'll help me learn how to transition to this place. And I get asked to provide product for an event. We can either say what it is or not what it is. And then also get invited to the event in New York.
It was a book party.
Okay, it was a book party.
For a book that I released.
Yes.
Around 2012, we'll say.
So not only was I asked to provide bacon granola under Clean Eats for the gift bags, I was also invited. And I was really excited because I was like, I want to get to know these people and be part of something, some bigger groups and bigger community. And so I get there. And it's the who's who's, and I think anybody listening to this would be super stoked to be in that room. And I was somehow not welcomed to the thing I was invited to. And then I was seeing how people were treating each other. And there was someone there that actually physically shoved me. And I was like, I remember the next day, and I met you there, obviously. It's a book you wrote, so you're there with the other people. But I remember having that experience that night and crying at the hotel. And then the next day, I asked one of the other authors there, who's a friend of mine, to meet me for breakfast. And I'm crying, and I'm not really someone who cries publicly like that. And I was like, is that what success is? Because I don't want to be any of those people. And he took a breath and he said, you know what? You are better than me. You are better than most of the people that you just experienced from like a moral fiber perspective. And I really need you to not quit. I really need you to know that if you just stick to your guns, stick to your morals, you will get there. Not for a while, but like, just know you're better. And I'm like, I don't know.
Narrator, thank goodness she didn't quit.
But because you were affiliated with that group, I just assumed you must be like birds of a feather. Like well, I'm going to just avoid that guy because I don't want more of what I just experienced.
Yeah.
And we would exchange notes, right? And then when we started to talk more, years later, you had a similar of like, oh, this is what was said to me about you. And so there was this like missed opportunity to actually create a friendship where like to me you could have been an ally because you and I view our purpose, not doesn't matter what we're doing, but our purpose here very similarly.
Yeah, it's one of those bittersweet moments where you were treated so wrong. And the reason why it's bittersweet, it's bitter in many reasons. One, it was bad. I mean, you literally, I remember walking in and the group that I was with just started talking shit. And I remember being like, oh, you like worked with her before, doesn't like, no, but you could just tell like she thinks that she belongs, but she hasn't earned anything. And I'm sitting there and I realized that like, it's the moment that like you learn as you get older, like, no, you stand up for those injustices, right? Me now would be like, why would you do such a thing? Me back then was too timid, and I did it wrong because like you stand up to the bullies, you really do. So it was sad. It's sweet in a weird way because it was the first of many moments that showed me who these people were. Right? Sometimes you work with people and you become disillusioned because the work product can be good or the success can be good or the money can be good that you either overlook or don't notice who these people are. And I think my radar in terms of like understanding the moral fiber of people is way better because you start to see how easy it is to become disillusioned by success. So it was helpful for me because then once I saw that and my eyes were open to it, well, I didn't stand up to it in the moment. It didn't allow me to color you in any box, right? For you, it was like, oh man, this guy's hanging out with this group. Gotta be an asshole. For me, it's like, oh, if she's on the outside, she's gotta be okay. Because like anyone that they don't like is probably okay. And it showed me this ugly side. And then it just like kept on popping up, or we go to other events or speaking at certain things and they would constantly label people and then like position themselves in a part of the room where like no one should be around them. And if you should know anything about me, like I own 3-4 different companies. I don't have a job title. I don't go by CEO or president or anything like that. My title in my work is man of the people, because that's what I want to be. I own an events business, and there is no VIP section in the events, but there's no upsell. Like, it is democratized. Like, we're all on the same level. We should be. Well, so Pen Name has an events company called 212. That's all 212 for, 212, all for like entrepreneurs, very successful people, but it's like, we all hang together. There's no ivory tower, none of that.
Yeah.
And, you know, it was helpful for me, and it helped me hone that craft to like not be thrown off by the facade of success or appearances. But it was hard because I remember that. It's funny, when we connected many years later and you told me your experience and I told you mine, you're like, oh my goodness. And I remember it because it was such a staggering approach for people to be so judgmental and mean, especially about someone that they didn't even know.
That they invited.
They didn't know, and they invited. It's like, why did you? It was like an invite-only event.
Like,
it's so weird.
Why would it was super bizarre for me. I think the thing that was most painful around that treatment was I showed up excited, happy, innocent. Like, I don't put anybody on a hierarchy of any sort. I was just super stoked to be there, and to have that gentleness of me to be treated that way. I'm like, maybe I don't want to be in this world. Maybe no. Which also, by being treated that way, I didn't get close to anybody at that party, which allowed me to create my own lane completely separate from that. And then I don't have to have that affiliation with that temperature. But to say, it's taking the better route that puts you in the positions, and your positions were live strong. And then from there, you went to help Tim.
From there, I started a couple companies. So I started Porn and Fitness, and I started Pen Name.
Yeah.
And a few years after doing Pen Name, I had worked with Tim on and off on a couple different things, just like help them not in a formal capacity. And then
I have to say who Tim is. Do people not know who Tim Ferris is?
Tim Ferris. I mean, Tim's been on your show now.
I know, but
so if you listen, yes.
Because everyone that's for the first handful are all my friends, and I just assume that people know who people are. So I'm like, Tim
Ferris, the Tim Ferris show, a 4-hour work week, 4-hour body, 4-hour chef, Tools of Titans, Tribe of Mentors, Fearless, you name it.
Yeah. High standards, high morals.
Standards. Brilliant.
The trust circle is small, so it means a lot that he would trust you with his work.
He's brilliant. A lot of people don't like Tim, and I think it's because he makes people nervous and says things that people aren't willing to say.
Yeah.
But having worked with him for so long, he's brilliant. Yep. So I mean, with Tim, it was a matter of, the stakes were so high because he holds everyone to a higher standard. But it's like, if you've ever played sports, it's like the moment where you play the person who's clearly better than you, and suddenly like you're better than you've ever been. I played a lot of sports, but I loved playing tennis. And it was so hard when I played tennis and you play what you call like a pusher, the person who like all they're doing is like just lobbing the ball back, and they force you into unforced errors because like you allow their game to influence yours. Now the inverse of that is when you play the person who's clearly better than you. You're taking on Nadal, right? And you're still going to lose. But you elevate your game 100%. So much that like if I played like this always, I would be incredible. And that's what it was like working with Tim. It's like you stepped on the field with him and it was hard and it was difficult. And sometimes it felt like it's not possible. But then like you might sometimes fall short of like what the stated goal was, but you would blow past in reality what was possible. Remember when we got back rights to like one of our early projects was he did a TV show, the Tim Ferris Experiment, we got back the rights. And like his thing was, I want to be number one on like digital streaming, which is like selling it through like Apple and, and iTunes at the time. And this is at the same time like Game of Thrones is out and is like the stalwart at number one. And I'm like, wait, you want us to supplant Game of Thrones of number one on this channel? And we did for a while. And it's no different. So like, we helped them with like Tools of Titans and Tribe of Mentors. And it's like, I want to sell this many copies and I want to be number one for this long. And it's like, I want to get this many email addresses. And it's all so aggressive, but intentional and smart. And then it forces you to come up with solutions,
Mm-hmm.
right? And Tim has the question that, I talk about, like, what would this look like if it were easy?
Mm-hmm.
Which is the hardest question in the world to answer.
He's asked me that with things before too.
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm not in the mood.
It's like, I remember we'd be out at dinner and it's like a nice dinner and he brings up some hypothetical. He's like, what would it look at if it were easy? I'm like, oh my God, I'm sweating. It's so hard right now. And it's a forcing function that makes you look at things differently, ask different questions. And and it's why he's so successful. I think he gets more out of himself. He looks at things differently. He gets more out of the people around him.
Right.
And no matter what you think of him, everyone's entitled to their opinion. That's a really smart guy who's successful for a reason.
Right.
He's really good at what he does.
Right. He has a really strong intuition too. And what I want to point out is he also plays over here in this lane. And if you're playing over there in that lane, someone like that can more easily see you if versus you're all in that big group.
Right.
And then you go to another outlier, Arnold Schwarzenegger. He has his whole own freeway system over here. And if you are not in your lane of high morals, high standards, empathy, doing the right thing, there's no way that he could see you. And I say that to be like, people ask me, how do I get the clients that you get? Like, what did you do? What email did you send? I'm like, I just existed. I did the work for so long.
Yep.
And the referrals come in because one person speaks highly of you to another person. They go see how you represent yourself online. They follow you for a while. Like, okay, she's really about the work. She's not about any of this noise. And it happens organically over time. There is no 5 bullets to get the types of clients that you think you want that are shiny. And
there's no 5 bullets for referral either. I'm kind of like you. I've been able to work with Arnold and Tim. Reid Hoffman, founder, if you don't know, of LinkedIn and co-founder of PayPal. Eric Schmidt, who was like the CEO of Google for a long period of time. Frank Blake, who's the CEO and chairman of the Home Depot. Like, the people that I've been able to work with are unreal. And I don't say that as a flex. I said it as like so much of that work is that I did such a good, be so good they can't ignore you, that I didn't need to sell myself. These people that I helped out were like, no, you need to work with Adam. I got to work with LeBron for many years. How did I get to work with LeBron? Because when LeBron wanted help in the wellness space, he went to his family office. He pointed him to Arnold, and Arnold was like, one person to talk to. Go talk to Adam. And like, there's no way to hack that. Right.
Things that matter.
There's no way to hack that.
And I love the be so good they can't ignore you. And I add another piece to it. It's be so good they can't ignore you, and so focused they can't interrupt you. Because you can get a really great shining opportunity, and that means other opportunities are going to come along.
Yes.
And not every good opportunity is your opportunity, and be a person of your word and see the opportunity in front of you through, and don't be distracted. Focus on the work.
Yeah.
And that's the piece that I think people, they get a little bit of success and then they're just off the rails. Their podcast gets a little too big and suddenly they're just having every schmuck on there.
Right.
Changing their moral compass. And I'm like, why?
Yeah, there's something to mastery.
Yes.
And you when you truly have mastery, the thing that you do so well continues to pay dividends that you don't have to spin off, right? When we started having success with Tim, because at one point we were doing so much with him, and so much of that credit truly just goes to Tim, right? Like, we just knew how to complement his brilliance really well and bring to life and execute at a high level what he wanted to execute. There are lots of opportunities that, they're appetizing. But it's a distraction, right? And working with Arnold, I've worked with Arnold for like 12 years now. He's got his focus principle, and I see it every day. That he's got his thing that he's doing that day, and he will not do anything else. We're building this huge media business, and we got the new year coming up, and this is like when wellness goes crazy. And I remember needing him for something, and he's like, "No, I can't. I got to shoot tomorrow. I'm prepping today." And I'm like, "The time is important." He's like, "The time has to come later. I'm not doing anything but this today." And that ability to focus changes for different people, because some people are carrying multiple things. But Arnold, whatever he is focusing on that day, he does uninterrupted. And then it's like it moves to the next thing. And that laser-like focus is incredible.
It is. How dare he try to derail your day with me if that's one of his principles?
The pancakes look good. It was the holiday season. He's very gracious. He's like, "Do you want to eat this?" And it was funny because normally when I eat with them, the joke is that like they eat like 10 times better. They're like trying to show off. And I walk up because again, it was unplanned.
Yeah.
And I see this table full of pancakes and syrups and delicious foods, which I'm totally fine with. But I'm like, oh, I see how it is. This is how you normally eat when I'm not around.
So you work with Arnold now. I want to give people an idea of the scope of things that you do and what you're responsible for. Because a lot of people say, I work with so-and-so. And like, what does that mean? Oh, I get their coffee. And I'm like, admirable, but don't know why you're flexing right now.
I get them the best coffee.
But you really are a centerpiece of the ecosystem for the newsletter.
The best way to put it is I manage Arnold's entire media infrastructure. So there's a daily newsletter, there's a daily podcast, there's daily. There's obviously you then have advertisers. The app is a massive project because we are making updates and iterating that every single 2 weeks, right? Like we want to make this app great. We've got merch. We're building out different media partnerships. So it's running all that in terms of building out the team, creating the content, building the narrative, building the audience, all of it. So it's a vertically integrated business, and that's kind of what we do, right? We produce, at Pen Name, my agency, we produced a lot of podcasts, we built a lot of businesses. We've done everything from like back in the day, the Dollar Shave Clubs in the world and the Microsofts of the world to coffee companies. We worked at Four Sigmatic. We both know Taro for many years on the side of that, and other coffee companies. I
feel like I'm the only people who can say his last name, right? So I'd love to say it.
I just refer to him as Taro. There's a lot of vowels and letters, and he's such a wonderful human. But it's been fun because I like the work that I get to do because my job is to go in, and I always say that like we identify the gap between where someone is and where they want to be.
Right.
And then our job is to eliminate that. And sometimes it's scaling, sometimes it's growing, sometimes it's identifying market opportunities, sometimes it's building products or services, or sometimes it's even incubating an entire company, right? With Arnold and LeBron, we created Ladder from day one. And that was a company that within 3 years got acquired, but it was like, what's the concept? What's the product? What's the product going to be? How are we going to source it? How are we going to market it? We built together that entire business, and then
it was fun to watch. It was a lot of fun to watch.
It was fun.
So essentially, you're
sad how it ended.
Yeah,
but fun to build it.
Burr, burr, burr. So essentially, you're very useful. To use the book title for Arnold is "Be Useful," but tactically very useful. So you have Pen Name, and then you're running everything for Arnold for
the Pump Club.
Yep. And then you've got 212.
212 is our events business. Cryogenically frozen right now just because events were so wonky in a post-COVID universe.
And then you still have the time to write a book.
Written a few books. Written 9 now.
9?
9. I've ghostwritten a lot. So for actors and athletes,
I was like, wait, I feel like a shitty friend.
I've written 5 of my own, 4 for other people. And then I've got Born Fitness, my little fitness and nutrition business that's been humming along since 2009.
Before I dive into the more of the book stuff, how do you keep content new 365 days a year over the course of years? Because nutrition and wellness, the basics are what work.
The basics are what work.
Right.
One, you listen to people and understand, right? We need repetition to learn.
Okay.
Right? Especially because there's so many distracting shiny objects, right? Trends are a virus in the wellness industry because trends pull people away from what works. So the way that you keep things relevant is you address those trends with an antidote, which is the reality of things. So I think part is just repetition, telling people what they need to hear from different angles until they actually believe it, so they do it, because it's the same thing that happens in sales. Like if you were to talk to a marketing team, great marketers understand that like essentially 10% of people are going to buy their product no matter what, right? They're the brand advocates. They love this stuff. You could sell them shit on a stick and they're still going to buy it and pay a premium. 10% of people are never going to buy anything. You can give it to them for free. You can pay them. They're not going to touch it. They're not buyers. They're not your audience. The other 80% of people are on the fence, and it's your job to understand like how far are they really closer to never going to buy, being a dissenter? Are they closer to wanting to buy? And then what is the marketing and messaging and storytelling that you can tell someone so that they decide to buy in or get involved, right? That's what marketing all comes down to. So when you're dealing with this, like you start to understand and look at it from the lens of like, well, where do people sit on this continuum? Because like a marketer could tell you, oh, it takes us like 7 touch points before someone starts to buy. So repetition is a part of education, which is a part of if someone cares about something, they actually want more information. It's not like, just tell me about it once, tell me multiple times. My job then is to like thwart the misinformation that's out there, which gives you content ideas, reinforce this stuff, position it from different angles so that people can truly contextualize and understand. And then the main goal is like provide information that is the least likely to do harm. While even if it does, nothing has the upside to potentially help people. And when you look at from that lens of like what is the least likely to do harm and then has a lot of upside to help people, there's a lot of things that you can cover as long as there is a practical application. So I don't like touching the animal studies or things like that, or the things where there's like literally been like one fringe study that has never been replicated, or there's no practical usage, even if it hasn't happened in a lab, right? Sometimes, I would say oftentimes, what happens in real life is way ahead of what is proven out by science.
Yeah.
True evidence-based practitioners understand that evidence-based is the intersection between what we know from scientific research and what we know from real life.
Yeah, but the word evidence-based has taken on a new connotation. Like if I see evidence-based in a profile, I'm like, oh my God, you're gonna be so annoying.
Yes, because they become obsessive with it. Well, if it hasn't been in a study, and I'm like, well, like I don't get so caught up in the who funded this, because like funding needs, I care more about the methods, how it was done, was it blinded? But there is reality, like a lot of studies don't get funded because there isn't money. So if the only way that we judge something is by like, is there published research or how many RCTs are there? We're probably missing on a lot of things that can help people. And that's where like the job, or my job, is A, to translate. As I said for many years, I'm a translator because a lot of science communicators just want to sound smart. They don't want to help people. So A, I want to help people. I don't care if you don't think I'm smart. I care if I help you. B, a lot of people just want to be right. I say my job is not to be right, it's to get it right. So that means if I was wrong, I'm going to be the first person to stand up and be like, I got this wrong, here's why. You know what that does? That builds trust. Because again, I don't need to be the smartest, I don't need to be right, I need to get it right. I need to be an agent of the people, and that gives you a lot of latitude to understand what you can talk about. And three, it's like, how can you make this relevant and practical for people, where they read something, but then they're like, how does this apply to me? Very few people touch on the practical application of information. Then what do I do, right? Some people like to touch on the why or the what, but very few discuss the how. I live in the how, and people love that. And there's infinite amount of topics, research trends that go out there. And if you look at it from those three lenses, there's a lot of ground to cover, but it takes time. And then you just listen, right? I go and I get feedback every single month from people on what they like in the newsletter, what items they found most helpful, what they hated, what they'd like to see more. And it's not that everyone else has the answer, but if you're not listening, you're not learning. And like your job is like goal number one of creating content is know your audience.
Yeah. So selfishly, when you say, and I don't know if 7 is arbitrary, but say 7 touch points for that conversion or whatever you will.
And that's any given brand, right? I've worked with, I can't name the brands, but I've worked with brands where they leave like 33 touch points for very high ticket items. Then you see why these companies are such in financial trouble, because the amount of paid ads that they have to do just to get one sales, the customer acquisition cost is completely messed up, where it's like, that is a zero-sum game where no one is going to win. So then you start thinking about like, and some people might be 2 touch points, but everyone has that 80%. How many touch points does it take to like get me over the line? Right.
So if you're trying to do repetition on a topic with someone, and it's a newsletter, 365 days, how much space do you give in between a topic before you repeat it?
I think it depends on how much depth of information is there on something that they can't get it, right? So if someone's like on the fence about, like, should I take vitamin D? I'm not going to say every single day vitamin D is great, especially when there's a mixed bag on some of this stuff. But even within 1 week, I can go ahead and say like, hey, vitamin D is correlated with less Alzheimer's and people that are deficient in it. Vitamin D is also correlated with people with less dementia. Vitamin D, if they're deficient, it can also work as a powerful hormone that helps them from a fitness standpoint. So if you hit it from different angles that are all relative to like what's going on either in a news cycle or why you might be talking about it, you could cover it within a week, because it's not like you're saying the same thing over and over. You're starting with
the topic, and vitamin D happens to be the
right. So I'm not saying buy this vitamin D supplement. I'm saying you should go ahead and find out if you're deficient in it, because most people don't want to find out if they're deficient because there is a little bit of friction, as in like going and getting a blood test, right? So if my job is to know your body so you can know your risk, I want to give you enough reason to be like, all right, I'm not worried about Alzheimer's, dementia too. Oh man, now I got no gains. Maybe I should check my vitamin D, or maybe I should start taking, right, if like the minimum is this amount, maybe I should just start taking that insurance. And then maybe at some point or the next time I see a doctor, I'll ask, hey, can you check these levels because something goes off in their brain. So it's like every like mission of a company is different, right? I've got nothing to sell people per se in the newsletter, right? We have the app that people can buy into, but the idea of the newsletter is to democratize access to information so that anyone can do it. Anyone can read it, and we're not going to charge you for it. We got 600,000 people on that list right now. We've spent $0 on marketing, right? It's just like, we want to provide great information. And like, if we don't have the answer, I go out and find like the experts. We want you contributing to the newsletter. You know this, because it's just like, again, I don't need to be right, but I can be a conduit to give you access to the people that in a normal circumstance, maybe I couldn't learn from Mary. Maybe I couldn't get access to something, to this information, but because we have such a huge platform, I'm going to give you access to that. And if my job is to make you more aware or take more action or do the little tiny thing, I'm such a big believer in like, right, small actions compound to big results. But most people, we underestimate small. We think we have to do these grandiose things. Nowhere is this more apparent than in dieting. Everyone thinks like the path to better health is like, I have to cut out, insert X ingredient here. And that ingredient might be a problem, and you might eventually need to do it. But if you go cold turkey on something, the likelihood based on just like human psychology and behavioral change is it'll last for about 2 to 4 weeks and then you will fall apart. It needs to be incremental. So my job is to make it easier for people to make these incremental changes by giving them enough information that they convince themselves like, I'm being kind of silly if I don't go ahead and do this. Or like, how many times do they have to say like, know this, know this, know this, and they're showing me why it matters for me to say like, why do I continue to be ignorant? And then like, it creates cognitive dissonance, right? I care about my health, but I've never checked my vitamin D. And it's like, do you though? Do you really? I want to help people not be their own worst enemy.
I will sometimes have somebody say something to me or ask me a question, and I'm like, cool. So you listen to Andrew Huberman, and that's it. Like, you got a soundbite, amazing, and it's
you're getting sunlight in your eyes right now. I see you, Huberman. I see you.
It cracks me up. You're really great and bullish on creating habits and reframing people's relationships with nutrition and wellness and workouts, because there is so much noise, and it frustrates me personally because like I've always talked about the importance of organ meat because that's what I've eaten my entire life. And then you have someone like Liver King show up, and now my conversation is, it's so hard to have, because if I'm like, oh, we're going to incorporate some liver into your diet because of your blood work, not blindly because of your blood work, and they're like, well, Liver King, you know, he really, I'm like, oh my God, if this man never existed. And so when you do your Q&As,
like, really? People thought he was natty? Come on. Come on.
It's again, these
He-Man is real. He-Man is real.
It makes my job so fucking hard. But when you do your Q&As, you have this smirk on your face when you're answering these questions, because it's like, oh, here we go. Let me just tell you what the real is. And there's all these words and modalities that could do a lot of good when applied the right way for the right reasons, but they've been hijacked and blanketed. So like something like keto has a purpose for this subset for a period of time, but then someone's running with it and it's now keto everything. And it's like, people did not need to remove all of those things from their diet.
Well, that's the thing, right? If like we talked about real life experience oftentimes being ahead of science, talk about your real life experience. Don't say it as a generalized statement. Like, you will find that I'm very, very diet agnostic. I can acknowledge all the different things that work. I can even acknowledge all the things that work that have very little to no scientific evidence, because if there are anecdotal results, I know that something's happening. Do I know why? Do I know the mechanism? Do I know if it'll work for everyone? No. It works for me and here's what it did for me is very different than like, this will cure your cancer. This will make you lose fat. And the one of the biggest issues in wellness is that people care so much about selling rather than helping that they almost can't help themselves to go into like, this is your magic bullet.
Right.
There is no magic bullet.
Right.
Like if it worked for you, please tell me why it worked for you.
My
and that
favorite
it
hat, by the way.
might not, right? It might not. Yeah.
There is no magic pill.
There is no magic pill.
For me in my world, right, I have not just what I saw work for myself, but my client list is so dynamic and so vast over 12 years. So I get to see things that do work that only recently now are having some studies to back it up. I'm like, yeah, I noticed that in the field like 10 years ago, and that's really cool. And when I want to have that discussion, it's then muffled by the "this is the only way" voice. I'm like, fucking A, this is so frustrating.
I mean, wellness is religion, right? People just, they find their deity and they buy in. Where the funny thing is, and there are exceptions to this rule, but if you were to take all the different diets, like they share 80% of the same philosophies. And if you would focus on the commonalities rather than the differences, you can find which different elements you want to bring in. But most of the messaging is the same. People just find different things work for them. And that's okay. We're different people.
But it depends isn't sexy.
I know.
People
Sex
don't want the
sells.
it depends, or it takes
Sex
time.
sells. And that is what, like, right, our brains, and I talk about this in the book, our brains react to novel information. Right? fMRI shows that our brains light up. And it's not just that we react to it. We think that the more difficult and complicated something is, the more likely it is to work.
If I'm suffering, it must be good for me.
Right. And the funny thing about science is that scientists, to feel very, very confident about something, will look for two things: validity and reliability, right? Like what you are testing is proving out, and you can do it over a long period of time. Validity and reliability are fundamentally boring because it means you're testing the same thing over and over and over again. It's like you trying something that you want to try something in your own lab with your clients, with 10 different clients over 5 years, where you can say like, listen, I don't have a study to back it up, but this is what I see 90% of the time. And you say it over and over and over again to the point that it's like, oh, Mary, but like, what's the new thing? I'm like, no, this is the thing that works. Yeah, but what's the new thing? You've been talking about this for 5 years. I'm like, yeah, it's because I'm very, very confident. I'm very confident this will work. It ain't sexy, but it's going to work. Just do these 3 things. I know you've heard me say it, but do it. It's really going to make a big difference. Yeah, but someone's telling me that if I do like a keto fasting cleanse and I go ahead and take these 17 supplements, that I'm just going to like transform in 4 weeks. What you think?
Yeah.
Our brains are so smart that we know it sounds too good to be true, but at the same time, our brains are wired to think like it's so complicated that it must be better. I'm going to try it. And this explains this vicious cycle of how people get into trouble.
Yeah. My reset, which I try to explain to people, it's a week for you to learn about your body. Cause I even have on my website, if you're here to lose 10 pounds in 10 days, please email me for a refund. Cause that's not what this is. And it's for you to learn about your body to then know what to do next. It's not what you guys think is a detox or a cleanse in those ways. Cause there is no magic pill. This is 1 week's not going to solve you. 1 week's going to give us information to figure out what the next 6 months and year looks like. But it's not about making you suffer to get results, because those don't go hand in hand. You can eat a whole bag of Cheetos, spicy Cheetos. You're going to suffer. You're going to tell me that's good for you? Because your butthole's not going to think so. Right. So when you say...
the old butthole test.
So when you say I talk about this in the book, we're talking about you can't screw this up.
Right.
How long did it take for you to know you should write this book?
To know I should write it?
Right.
Probably like 2 years. To actually write it, 9 years. So that book party that we talked about, at the time I was really proud of that book because it was different. And there are parts of the book that I'm still proud of.
It was a good book.
It was an entertaining book. It was written very differently, right? Taking people through the hero's journey. So trying to create a narrative arc to make a wellness book not so boring and formulaic. But there are a lot of things that I did. Like you do this book and you think it's great and people see results and then they get back to you like a year later and there's a lot of people who are just like more frustrated than you want them to be, right? My job isn't to put out books to make money. My job is to put out books to truly help people create something that lasts the test of time. And I learned after that book that like that book was not going to last the test of time because there were some things in it that were good and there were some things that were not. And it's because I reacted too quickly to certain things that like there wasn't enough validity and reliability to say with confidence in a way that I would want to etch it in stone for something to be a perennial seller. Again, good workouts, good information, but it's just like I kind of missed the mark. And so it's like you realize that you want to identify, well, like what are the true barriers that help people out agnostic of diet or fitness preferences, right? Because like there's no shortage of nutrition books, right? There's no shortage of YouTube videos. Why do so many people struggle to change and change in the long term, right? And I think I found like these 3 C's. There's the cost, complexity, and convenience that fundamentally corrode the ability to build foundational habits or create confusion. Another C that then disrupts people's ability to adapt and change their behavior. But writing a book on that is very, very difficult. Selling a book on that is even harder because again, it's not sexy and all publishers like want that hook. What's the hook? And my hook was like, well, like you are actually going to see results that last. You're gonna be able to figure out what works for you. You're gonna be able to remove the barriers, avoid all of these landmines that people step on so that you just stop blowing up on your path to be healthier. Because I've been doing this now for more than 20 years, which is crazy to me. And I carry that pain of the people who struggle probably in the same way that you do. I've had so many people come to me just who feel broken and don't feel like there's a way to be healthier. And like you want to help those people, but you realize that it's not as simple as like, you know, take this pill for 4 weeks and get back to me. So I realized after that book that I thought was so great was kind of missing the point that I think a lot of books, it's not that they lack good information, it's that they start people where they're at and they ignore the journey that it takes to get there, right? It'd be the equivalent of like a professional swimmer taking someone to teach them to swim and just tossing them in the deep end and being like, yeah, just don't sink, right?
And that's how I learned how to swim. Parent just tossed me in the pool, broke all trust.
you made right, like, right. You break all trust. Whereas like the real way, and it's no different than like anything you learn, right? In math, do you start someone with complicated algebra and geometry? No, you teach them addition and subtraction. You allow them to master the basic concepts, and then you layer on more difficulty because they can handle it. And we've gotten to this point where people understand that discomfort is a part of growth, but we've got it all twisted. We think that we need to maximize discomfort to force people to growth. We actually has to minimize discomfort while still having them do it so they can challenge themselves, expand their borders. What I say, expand the comfort zone.
Collect some wins.
Collect some wins, build confidence, and then you further expand that comfort zone. Because the more that you start to have these wins and do good practices, the more you start to realize the things that you once thought served you actually do not. But that's much easier said than done. You actually have to teach people how to systematically go ahead and make changes that set them up to have those wins while experiencing discomfort, but not so much discomfort that, you know, they're being tossed in the deep end and cutting their arm open and throwing sharks in the pool. Because that's wellness. We throw people into extreme situations when they are a beginner. The example I give in the book is that it's like, you know, if you've never exercised before, I've got 2 options when you walk into the gym the first time. I can teach you how to move, I can screen you, and I can have you do like 3 sets of 10 of body weight squats. And it's not going to seem sexy or cool, but the next day, if you've never trained before, your legs are going to be killing you. 2 days later, you're not going to be able to sit on the toilet, right? That was discomfort. The stimulus was enough relative to where you are. Or you can walk in, and I can load up a bar with 300 pounds and have you sit underneath it and like you nearly die. The discomfort is going to feel much more intense, but the discomfort's going to be so intense that you can't thrive and you probably never step foot in the gym again and you're terrified of it and you don't think that you can win. Both are discomfort, but the relative discomfort to where you are is not setting you up for long-term change, right? And this is wellness. That's the microcosm, and to the point that like every time we then like make mistakes, we screw up, we're teaching people that it's wrong. The moment that they have like 2 grams of sugar in something, we've talked about this from a product, they freak out. I've had sugar, I'm this horrible person. They catastrophize, and it's not that they had the 2 grams of sugar, it's what comes after.
Right.
I need to punish myself, I need to starve myself, and then that additional resistance, right, causes people to break down and snap, and then they eat all the sugar, they give fuck all to their diet, and that's the mistake they make. And if we can break the vicious cycle of not causing people to catastrophize and not putting them in a position in the first place where every single mistake is magnified, people are much more likely to thrive. But that flies in the face of what the wellness industry teaches you, where it is rooted in fear, and there is a reason for that, because fear drives action. Fear is a great way to sell people. Fear is a
Right.
great way to get people to buy. Fear is a great way to break people and make them dependent on you, because when you make it so extreme and they see a little bit of results, then they go to anything less than
Right.
extreme and they don't. They think, oh shit, the only way I can be healthier is if I go through this pain and misery.
And don't have joy. Joy
That
is so
is the
important.
deception. That's a manipulation.
Yeah.
The wellness industry manipulates people to break them so they are more broken down, so they will continue to buy.
Right.
And I hate it, because the wellness industry can be so good. And again, it doesn't mean there isn't some discomfort. There's a
Right.
change is hard,
Right.
but it's hard is different than miserable.
Right. This is more of an extreme, but when I first got my celiac diagnosis, meaning there are foods I absolutely cannot eat.
Right.
Like, unfortunately, I'm hoping there's a way. I want croissants. I want a real croissant so bad.
They are delicious. I can't lie. They're so good.
But my family's old school. They're from Egypt, and I remember my uncle, who is that stereotype uncle who's like really well off, really opinionated. He goes, "Celiac? You don't have celiac. You're just unhappy when you eat. Be happy? No celiac." And
You solved it.
yes,
Hey.
but there's some truth to that. I have clients and friends that think there's so many things they can't eat, and they have anxiety over it. And they actually don't realize that it's their anxiety that's giving them the stomach ache, not the foods. I have celiac disease. I can't have gluten,
Right.
right? That's different than someone who feels they have gluten intolerance or are sensitive to it, but they're so wound up and like their workout has to be extreme, their food has to be so limited. And I'm like, what would happen if you sat down with your food, took a deep breath, smelled your food, chewed it thoroughly, took time to eat it? Your body is now not stressed out. You're not making yourself feel bad for what you ate. You focused on mostly whole foods. What if you don't have to cut out all these food groups? What if you just needed to relax a little and be kind to yourself in that process? What if? And some of them are like, there's a lot of truth to that
Yeah,
when they really sit with it.
I could have named this book "Be Kind," right? Truly, because so much of it is about that. Like, I think there was a study in there that said the average person feels stress or anxiety 8 times every time they prepare to go and eat. And then when you consider that, like, the average person eats 3 times a day, right? That's another 24 stressors on top of like the extra 100, right? We catastrophize, and like we think we don't carry that. Like, if the plan that you're on creates so much stress and anxiety about every single thing that you do, that is the opposite of being healthy. Right? Again, like
Unhappy. You're unhappy when you eat.
the hard part is going to create discomfort, but the hard part shouldn't be making you miserable. And I
Right.
think like we know how we feel. Not like, oh, I don't like eating this food and I know it's good for me. Like, we know how we feel. And when we don't necessarily listen to that call and don't listen to like, wow, this is a lot of stress, this is a lot of anxiety, this is very uncomfortable for me. That's like it is a sign, but we don't listen to the sign because we're trained that like this is actually what health is supposed to be. Like, it's supposed to be painful.
I have a hard time identifying with the punishing of what you eat, and I also have a hard time identifying with the like, for me, it feels good to make the choice that makes sense for my body and to feel good. For me, I have no problem going to a restaurant and ordering off the sides menu because I know that there's ingredients I can't eat because
Right.
they'll actually make me sick. So I try to spend a lot of time trying to understand why it's easier for me to make those choices and why it's more difficult for someone else, so I can help them walk towards making better choices. And so I did create a calendaring system where I show clients, start calendaring not just what you're eating, but how you're feeling, how your stool is, how your sleep is before we even get started working together. Then we do the reset week, and then we start doing programming based on labs after the research week. And I have them color code the days: good, bad, awful, neutral. And I do this because when we start to get a little more deliberate, when there's like a medical condition or we're trying to do performance and I'm talking to the coaches and just creating like a single sign-on for the whole experience of wellness and performance, there's more green days. And I like to show them when they're like, oh, I had a really bad day. And I'm like, oh, we'll document that. And then you just start to see the derailment happen. And I go, let's go look at the calendar. Look at all these green days you stacked. And like, I didn't even realize I had so many good days. I'm like, yeah,
Right.
you had a ton of good days. This one day is not a big deal. And I had one person tell me my whole life, this would have got me into a spiral for the next week. Because like the visual representation of this really spoke volumes to me. Where like I like pat on the back. And that's the best I could come up with to teach something that I didn't quite understand.
Right.
How do you teach someone to make the choices that make them feel good and not punish themselves when they make a choice to go out and enjoy themselves with their friends?
I think part of it is like helping people understand that nothing occurs in a vacuum,
Mm-hmm.
right? If I were to tell someone that they're going to do like one good workout every single week and never do anything the rest of the time, like how good a shape do you think you would be in? They're like, nah, probably not that good a shape. I'm like, so then why do you catastrophize one single meal? Right? Like it's so funny that in any other scenario, if you take the equivalency of what people do in nutrition and apply it, you'd be like, oh yeah, it's just like a blip on a radar. That's a rounding error.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It does not matter. But in nutrition, we catastrophize. So I try and take nutrition sequences and put it into other walks of life where it's so obvious.
Mm-hmm.
The way that we've educated people on nutrition, it's just like, it's so backwards that if you put it in any other scenario in life, it's just like, oh, wait, this does not make sense, but we've been brainwashed. We truly have. And then it kind of like you start to point out like when people feel good. Right? Like you felt good after this. So then why did you, right, when they have the meal that they love or they take an off day when they truly needed it, right? It's like, how did you feel? So then why did you go ahead and do something that made yourself feel worse? Right? Like sometimes it's like there's this intuitive nature of like, I'm doing something that is good for me. Because sometimes things that we do feel good, but we know it's not good. So it's like separating the things that feel good from the guilt that we have, and where does that guilt come from? And is it rooted in something that we know? And I think like when you take the scale of like, well, how much anxiety you feel, how much stress do you feel, why do you feel these things, and you just make people aware of it rather than assuming that it's normal, you can then normalize that like, one, this is a shared human experience. Like this wasn't the original name of the book. It wasn't You Can't Screw This Up.
What was it?
So here comes the fun part of the story, right? I said selling a book like this is really tough. So it's like you kind of play a game, and I say like sometimes I just, you take chances, you bet on yourself. The original name of this book was The Takeout Diet, because a big thing for me is that, I think takeout is part of the fabric of how we eat. And I know that is an easier sell to a book publisher, because there's a lot in there that teaches people how to eat takeout without doing the typical, like, don't ever order bread, cut your entree in half and don't eat half of it, never order dessert. And I'm like, this is not how takeout is meant to be enjoyed. That's like the misery diet. And no one does that. Yes, it would all work.
The next book
yeah, the misery diet. Yeah, that doesn't work. Yeah, okay, technically those are good ideas. No one's doing that. No one. So I wanted to get the book across, but I knew the book was something completely different. But I originally wanted to call the book like The Comfort Zone, this based on this idea of like where you move about in the comfort zone, where we leave it, right?
Yeah.
Yerkes Dodson, all about like anxiety, stress, arousal, and our performance, right? So that Yerkes Dodson, that inverted U, it's just like if you have no stress or anxiety, your performance sucks. If you have too much stress and anxiety, your performance also sucks. So you need a little bit, but it's like, right, we talk about like you got to have some wins while having some discomfort. But I took a test group of 500 people that I wanted to run through the program. Another thing I've learned in doing books over the last like 12 years is like, let people read the book first, let them do the program, anticipate their questions before you put it out in the world, and realize, oh, how did I not do that? Because I've done that so many times that you learn. And it was so funny, I had them all in a Slack group, and there was always people having incredible results. But the thing I kept on hearing was, I'm going to screw this up. I'm going to screw this up. It's the people who are thriving, and they just come to anticipate that this isn't going to work. They come to anticipate, well, I'm going to have the takeout, or I'm going to have the dessert, and everything's going to fall apart. And I'm like, what if those things are actually part of the plan?
Right.
What if off days are part of the plan? What if dessert is part of the plan? What if you haven't fallen off the wagon?
Right.
Right? You're still on the wagon. It just looks a little different.
Right.
And that was the thing that spoke to people. It's like the voice that they've created becomes like this self-expectation. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy that people think they're going to screw up. And then they carry that pressure where they just want to relieve the pressure, so they purposely screw up. It's like, finally, I knew it was going to happen anyway.
Right.
And then they spiral, right? Like one meal becomes an entire week, a week becomes a month becomes the last 6 months of the year.
Mm-hmm.
And then people wonder, or usually most formulaic, it's the end of the year, right? The average person gains about 1 to 3 pounds per year after the age of 30. Okay, so it's not like you just wake up for the average person 20 pounds heavier.
Mm-hmm.
It's that from the age of 30 to 50, you're putting on 20 to 60 pounds and you wake up in your 50s and you're like, I don't remember having a bad year. And the fascinating thing about this is the net of January through October is almost zero. The average person gains 1 to 3 pounds in November and December.
Mm-hmm.
So you'll see fluctuations throughout the year, but it's like I lose some, I gain some, I lose some. It's the yo-yo diet, right? End of the year, people get to November and they're just like, peace, I'm out. And they do 2 months of damage where they stick to none of their habits, none of their routines. They're like, well, I had a big Thanksgiving meal, so I might as well, I could get back on Monday, but like Christmas is like 3 weeks away. So like, I'm going to have all these parties, holiday parties. Why should I even care? And they completely lose their guidance because they get this mindset where I'm going to screw it up. I'll just wait till January. That rather than building momentum, they take 10 months of net zero and turn it into -3. And that -3 carries year over year over year. And it's like, you could have still gone to the parties. You still could have enjoyed Thanksgiving. You could have just been regular, everything in between. And you probably would have just been so good. But again, we freak out, we punish ourselves. And then like that punishment messes up mentally. And mentally, once we're more messed up, we're more likely to act worse physically. And then you truly see the domino effect of like, you're carrying more stress, you're feeling worse about yourself, you're now sleeping worse, and the worse sleep is making you crave more foods, and you're craving more foods and you wonder why, and then you eat them and you catastrophize even more, and then you stop exercising and you're just like, why does it even matter anymore? And this is what happens, right? It's just this vicious, I call it the circle of dieting hell, because like it self-perpetuates and it compounds.
Yeah. So everyone's saying, I'm going to screw this up. When did it hit you that that's the name? When was
after like the 10th or 12th person in the DMs, like, I'm going to screw this up. And I remember writing to my publisher, I'm like, what do you think if we call this, You Can't Screw This Up? Right. And
did they take it at first? Or was it
my editor was great.
Yeah.
Cassie was amazing. And she's like, I love this. Because it's a double entendre, right? It speaks to the psychology of like, no, when you think you're going to screw up, don't do it. And 2, it's like giving someone a plan that's so easy that like you can't possibly screw it up. She loved it. Little more convincing on the it's not as catchy as the takeout diet, but if the goal for me, I think so too. And for the goal for me is right, you want to create something that lasts, like irrespective of whatever diet trend is around 5 years, 10 years from now. I wanted this to be a diet agnostic book that teaches people the tenets of behavioral change, understands things from a human psychology, and shows that there is a way that you can be better regardless of what your food preference is. So if you lose your way or you find yourself freaking out, you can't screw this up.
It's very Tim-esque of you, how 4 Hour Chef is a book on learning.
Yes.
This is a book on behavior.
I reference Tim in this book not to fanboy. I think it's funny. I read some of the Amazon reviews like, this guy clearly loves Tim Ferris. Never read anything he does. And I'm like, that's a great straw man argument. What about what's in the book? But it was Tim's question about like, what would this look like if it were easy, that caused me to finally figure out, well, how do I address these issues of cost, convenience, and compliance in a practical way? And it was very, very difficult. It's why it took so long to write. Like, how do you write a psychology book that also has practical application, but appeals to a diverse population with different diets and food preferences, allergies and tolerances and so forth? And it's you take them out of the position where they can stop being their own worst enemy by giving them self-awareness of the things that they do. So instead of me being like, stop doing this, no one likes to be scolded, read the book and self-identify, like, do I do this? And then if you do this, right? Oh man, I do this thing. Here's the domino effect of that. Oh, I do this thing. It might not all apply to you. It's why, like, I talk about it in the book. I don't have any rules because I don't want people to think there's one size fits all.
Right.
I have tools, and it's like, find which one of these psychological situations approved to you, apply to you, and then use the tools to fix the problem.
Right. The thing that creates safety for someone who's approaching quote unquote diet for the first time or has yo-yo diet that you create is you start with, what do you love that's staying in?
Yeah.
Versus someone's like, you can't have your cookies, you can't have your, right? You're like, no. What do you love? What is like your favorite food? All right, guess what? that stays.
I love abundance, right? Like you go and start a diet and it's like, all right, we're cutting out all this stuff.
I thought you were going to say, I love a bear claw.
I do love bear claws too. They're delicious. Abundance mindset helps people because like when you start a plan, it is such a killjoy to be like, know all those things that you love, you get none of them. Mm-hmm. You immediately start from like, I can't wait till I'm done with this thing.
Yeah.
That's not how you set yourself up for success. You should be working towards something that you are excited about, right? That you just like visualize. I'm like, I want to start from like, listen, here's what they normally take you to get rid of. I'm going to keep this in here.
Yeah.
Right. Because I actually want to build the sustainable behavior. Again, another non-sexy thing. But like if there's one thing we know with a high level of certainty that I don't feel any study is going to disprove, the thing that you can consistently do for the longest period of time that is somewhat healthy is going to deliver the best results. Yes. The hard part is like, well, how do I do that? Yeah, I hate vegetables, so how am I going to integrate, right? So teaching people to build sustainable behaviors is the goal. What makes it sustainable is not making them crave everything they want. I referenced some study where like people were told for 24 hours, do not eat these foods, do not eat these foods, do not eat these foods. You had one job. It's Homer's like, don't eat the donut, don't eat the donut, no, right? And it's like, that was the goal. And then what ended up happening, they didn't eat the food, but they had 133% more calories. Mm-hmm. And that is the perfect representation of what happens on diets because you take away the thing they want and they want it and they want it and they want it. Yeah. You know, what you resist will persist. Right. And like people end up wanting it as opposed to like, no, like you can have this. And then like just knowing that it's there. Yeah. Just knowing it hasn't been removed, people tend to not crave it as much. We want what we can't have. So don't take away all the things that people want.
Yeah. At the pro level with my athletes, when they're going to be working with me for the first time, they're expecting the punishment performance plan. Right. And then I'm showing
the
up
PPP, the punishment performance plan.
And they're shocked. Like, wait, I'm going to get my waffles. Like, yeah, they're made to spec for you. And I usually ask them, what are all the foods you love? And then I make all those fit into the plan that we're doing. Brilliant. So, because seasons are long, right? I'm not going to have you have to suffer through to be an elite athlete. We can still make this work and make it fun. And then because I work with athletes on the team, but I don't work with the team. So you'll have one athlete be like, well, why does he get waffles with Mary? And I'm like, well, it's part of his plan. Meanwhile, the rest of the team's being punished. And I remember on the bus after playoffs, after we won the playoffs, I just remember two of the players who are not my clients. The first thing that's on the bus are like, to hell with the diet now. Yes, give me some food. And I'm like, oh, I started chuckling and I'm like, if you were on the Mary plan, we wouldn't have that.
Didn't have to be this way.
Because all of my clients get to enjoy it. There's an Olympic athlete I'm working with right now who was expecting that. And the first week I showed up with the Snickers that she likes, but made to spec and the blueberry. And she was just she's like, wait, I get blueberry barbecue? I go, yeah, it's made to spec for you. If I'm showing up with chicken and broccoli and saying no, 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 I am not doing you a service because what you're committing to achieve is so extraordinary that you're already putting yourself in challenging situations. I don't need to make you suffer for every meal. Your fuel source. There is an element of joy that's going to make you perform better. So even at that level, there is that psychology of off season. To hell with my diet. Whereas my athletes, their diet actually doesn't change very much because we incorporate the things they love.
Thing. That is a beautiful thing.
Yeah. I want to say, like, where do people find you? What do they do to get access to your stuff? But it's through your clients, through who you work with. Yeah. I really wish you would put more stuff out on your social.
Yeah, I've been kind of silent. It's been a tough year, so I think I've been more silent than usual. Yes. But I think I need to. I love interacting with people. I'll say that. You know, I think social media has a lot of downsides. I love it for many reasons. It's just been something that has been prioritized less. But yeah, you can find me on all the socials. It is Born Fitness. Mm-hmm. My pen name work is at penname.co, no com, penname.co. So yeah, it's...
You're a great role model. You're doing it right.
Thank you.
And that means a lot.
I love what I get to do, right? It's funny. Like if you go and so like pen name consulting is probably where I spend most of my time, that and the Arnold stuff. Mm-hmm. And if you go to pen name, people always ask that like in the P, there's like a little ghost, which many people have told me looks like a sperm. That I'm like, All right. Didn't see that when we designed it. Thanks. Forever ruined for me. But the idea is that I wanted to be the ghost in the machine.
Mm-hmm.
I learned a long time ago that, it's fun to do this because oftentimes I don't talk about the people that I work with because I'm just happy doing the work.
Mm-hmm.
I'm happy if the client is happy.
Mm-hmm.
I think when I first got into this a while ago, you thought that in order to be successful, you had to make it about yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And then I learned that I could actually do a lot more good and help more people and probably be more successful if I didn't make it about myself and made it about the clients, made it about the people that I work with. And if they succeed and they do great, I'll do great too. And I love being the ghost in the machine. I'm happy to have these conversations, but like knowing that the people that I work closest with and who get to know me know what I stand for and see the work that I do and that they see themselves succeed. That has been probably the most rewarding thing. And I could have never have anticipated that 20 years ago, but I'm so glad I went in that direction. And I think probably a lot of that is what we both understand. You get to work with some of the biggest names and you are so respectful of your clients that while it is tantalizing to name drop every opportunity, like unless you get that go ahead, you're happy enough with the people that you help, knowing that like that is rewarding in and of itself. And it's a great place to be in where you know that like when you're doing such a good service, you don't necessarily need the pats on the back to know you're doing good work.
I don't even have to ask you a closing question. Like, how do I... Now I build on that. Excellent work.
Your work here is done.
But thank you truly for coming on. I know that you head from here straight to the airport because that's just what you do.
Time to go back to my family.
Yes.
Miss them already.
Yes. Thank you.
And that is it on today's episode. Thanks so much for hanging out. Your time and attention never goes unappreciated. If anything in today's show stood out to you, I encourage you to share it to social and tag me. That is how you can help a little independent show like mine grow. And of course, rate, review, and subscribe to Eat, Play, Crush wherever it is you get your podcasts. If you want to follow me, I'm at Paleo Chef on social media or the show at Eat, Play, Crush. You want to stay in touch via my newsletter or get your hands on the gut reset, visit eatplaycrush.com. And until next time, be well, do good, and trust your gut.